I hope this morning's session was full of good things that can assist your organisation. What we'd like to do now is to move on to another area of our product suite, which is the XMPro tool, which is all around business process management. It has a strong integration interface with iPOS and Sun Systems, and indeed has a very strong standalone capability as a forward-looking and forward-thinking business process management tool. So I'd like to hand you over to my colleague Rainier, who will be taking you through this presentation in conjunction with Katie and myself as we go forward. So thank you, Rainier.
Okay. What are we at? Afternoon yet? Good more afternoon, everyone. I'm Rainier beside Note, and if I press the little button here, then my name will come up. I'm in fact not Katie, if anyone was confused about who I am. She'll be up a little bit later, and she's much softer on the eye than I am. Okay, so I always get sort of the wooden spoon, really, about talking about XMPro at an iPOS day. And as you've seen this morning, you've seen some really brilliant new functionality coming out in iPOS 8, and everyone's sort of gone into their little office cubicle and thought sort of, how am I going to do my work every day, and how is this going to help my employees and myself and my business. And then along comes little old me, and all of a sudden I'm talking about concepts. And everyone's stuck in their cubicle and say, well, I'm trying to do work, stop talking about concepts. So I want you all to sort of take a deep breath and relax. And just sort of follow me on our flight of fancy. I'll explain to you what's going on. You can't really get lost, and if you do get lost, I'll explain to you afterwards what's going on. All right. So, like I said, I've been tasked with the job of showing you how to extend beyond iPOS using XMPro. So, what I thought about doing is I'll position XMPro for you. And how we see XMPro fit into the current application offering and application stack, or however you want to call it, that PA has got. So I ended up with this amazing diagram. And as you can see there, it's called a Venn diagram for those who want to be technically minded and correct. I'll just talk about the bubbles. It's easier to talk about that. Okay, so what am I trying to represent here? So I'll talk you through some concepts here, some areas you need to look at, and then sort of hopefully we'll all reach the logical conclusion of what I'm trying to say. This is intended to be sort of read from my right-hand side over to the left, like you would read a book, and so you will see the sort of flow of my logic and my talk will sort of flow in the left, towards the left. Okay, a couple of areas to highlight. If you see the little iPOS bubble, and as well as the XMPro bubble and the Sun Systems bubble, so there's the three bubbles that sit there, and they've got a little solid boundary around them, and there's some things I'm going to talk about each of those bubbles in turn, and how they exist in their own right. I'm also going to talk about sort of that area in the middle where these bubbles intersect. So you'll see later on, we'll have a bit of a talk about how we see those bubbles intersecting and how that works, as well as the dark system X on the top left-hand corner there, which those of you, I've been warned that there are some people that get distracted by things that are incomplete. I will tell you what that bubble does, so don't focus on that for now. Just relax. I'll tell you about that later. All right, so let's move on with that. Okay, so the first thing we need to look at is the iPOS and the Sun Systems bubble. You guys have seen sort of, like I said, all the iPOS demos and things. And if you look at those, they are systems in their own right, and what we refer to as line of business applications. So these applications do certain things, and they do them well. And they're designed to do it. So iPOS looking after procurement, Sun Systems looking after finance, and Sundry, which I'm not going to pretend to know everything about. So each one of these systems do a specific job, and they do it really well. They're also highly structured systems, and highly transactional. So there's a specific number of transactions you go through, you create a requisition. So these systems are really good at doing their job in terms of what they're supposed to do. Now, how does XMPro fit into this? Well, XMPro also has a line of business. The trick is that XMPro's line of business is business process management. So just as iPOS looks after procurement, Sun Systems looks after finance, XMPro is really good at dealing with process and automating processes and also all the things that come with that. So I'm just going to drop that. So if you look at these applications, each one of them will have, for example, their own data sets and information sitting under there. Each one of them will have outcomes that you want to reach when you use those systems. And as well, each one of them can stand on its own right as a system. So hence why they each have their own little bubble. The only place where XMPro is really strange or difficult to understand and different to the other systems is that it's almost like a DJ at the party. It can stand on its own right and it can do a number of things, but it really comes to its own right when there's other people in the room, when there's other systems around, when there's other applications around, when there's a good PA system working. Then XMPro really comes into its own right because it can use a lot of that functionality and a lot of that data, underlying data structures and things to make your business processes function really well. It's almost like a DJ at a party. A good DJ will facilitate the interaction of different systems, different people, different entities in the room. So I see XMPro almost as a little DJ at the party, and its real intention is to help all your systems interact properly. Right. So now we've looked at all the bubbles, and now I'm going to talk about those overlaps. And I'm going to talk about a bit of shared DNA. So one of the things that underpin XMPro is the ability to deal with workflow. Now, that concept and that idea, a lot of you have heard being thrown around. iPOS has its own sort of DNA around workflow. Sun Systems bring out a lot of logic around workflow and how to deal with that. And those are really good things for us because the workflow enables us to function within those areas. The problem with most of these systems is that the workflow that is built into them are quite native to their functional area, the area that they are specifically good in. So iPOS will have workflows, but traditionally those will be around procurement. Sun Systems will have its own workflows, and those will be traditionally around the bubbles that system sits in. So with the boundaries around that system, each one will have a functional sort of area in there. The same with XMPro, but I'll explain a little bit later how XMPro deals with workflow in a different way. Okay, moving along. So we're still in that little middle section now. We've moved along from explaining iPOS, Sun Systems. I'm going to talk about the overlaps for you now. All right, so there is a distinct overlap between these systems, and as you can see on my little picture, there's certain areas that they share information. So they share common data elements, they share outcomes. If you think about iPOS as a simple example, a lot of the information that is used in iPOS and gets pushed back into Sun is sort of the shared outcomes and shared information that we speak about. Now XMPro has the same concept, and it also wants to sort of work well within the shared concepts and shared outcomes that you have. And I'll use an example for you. Supplier onboarding. If you think about the shared outcomes and the shared data of a supplier onboarding process, is that we can take a lot of the power that XMPro has to deal with process, capturing data, getting it approved, routing it around your business, sending out emails, those type of things. XMPro is really good at that. So we can borrow a little bit of process from XMPro. That information will ultimately reside in Sun Systems and will ultimately be potentially used by iPOS later on. So you can see how taking on a supplier is almost a shared outcome and a shared data set that we have got. So XMPro allows you to have these amazing processes, and you can use processes to do things, but in conjunction with the other systems, with iPOS and with Sun Systems, we can limit the amount of data sets you have to have sitting around, the amount of information you have that you duplicate in your multiple systems. So that's one of the dreams really for XMPro around iPOS and Sun systems, is to avoid you having to redo a lot of that information. All right. So as you can see here, there's a couple of processes that we've brought up, and in last year's example, or last iPOS user day, there was a lot of people that said it's a really nice talk and we really enjoyed the concepts and things like that, but could you maybe give us some practical examples? So what I have done is we've compiled a sort of list of practical examples that you guys can look at. One of the ones that I sort of want to highlight around that is also expenses. If you think about expenses, again, around that shared outcome, shared data concepts, again, the process logic of getting it approved, you can use XMPro to sort of route that around your business. iPOS will provide you with, one of our clients is using the iPOS approval matrix to get their expenses approved. There's sort of a natural fit there. And ultimately, those expenses will end up in Sun systems. So if we look at the overlaps, and we're focusing on the overlaps here, this is really where the room at large could benefit from XMPro, is to use it to deal with a lot of areas that sit at the edges of your application that might not be a natural fit, but it's a shared outcome of that application of something we want to reach. So if you want a sort of list of these processes, you can just come chat to me afterwards, or we can put it up for you again if you want to browse through that list. All right, that brings us to System X. Now, in cheap action movies, I could have had a nice sort of musical run-up to this, and so you would know that would be a dramatical moment, but I don't have that luxury, so I'm just going to introduce System X to you. The idea of System X is that you have a number of line of business applications outside. So we're moving sort of slightly to the left. I'm pulling you a bit to the left now. And you have a lot of business applications that sit outside iPOS and Sun systems. You have HR systems, you have CRM potentially, you have bespoke applications that you've developed. Now, all those applications play by the same rules. They're good in their functional areas, they do a job really well. But when you get to the boundaries and the edges of these processes or these applications, they have certain things that they don't do pretty well. And business process is traditionally part of that framework. So System X could be any system that you've got, and at the boundaries we will still find that XMPro can provide you with the sort of functionality you need around process. It's not to say that you need a system. Like I said, XMPro behaves best when it's playing DJ in a room, but it can stand on its own 2 feet as well, as in sort of processes that don't need to integrate with other systems. There's a lot of processes running through your business that are quite manual at the moment, that would benefit from the automation that you can bring using XMPro. Okay. So to help you further visualize really what is going to happen, or how you can use XMPro in your business, we've asked Katie, and she's graciously sort of accepted to help us out, to just show you a practical example. So you can see actual XMPro screens, how people are using XMPro in the everyday functioning of their business. And Katie, and I can't pronounce the name correctly. BayernLB. They are an iPOS client as well, so they've got iPOS in their business as well. But I'm going to hand over to Katie, and then you can go for it. I'm going to take my stuff off so I don't bother you with mine. Okay. Thanks, guys. Give Katie a hand, a nice warm one. There we go.
Okay, thanks very much. As Renee's just explained, we've been iPOS users for many years. So when we started to look for something to initially deal with our expenses, we decided to have a look at what PA could offer us. And XMPro was chosen as one of our solutions, primarily because of its flexibility. Most out-of-the-box solutions for expenses or leave requests, that kind of thing, are very inflexible. You can only impose their rules and regulations on your organisation, whereas we wanted something where we could put actually our own take on it. So that was our key reason for choosing XMPro. Initially, it was to deal with paper-based expenses process, which had become very difficult to manage. We had approvers that were losing expenses, burying them on their desks, and we weren't getting them back for a long while. So we decided to look at expenses, and then was hijacked by the HR department, who decided that absence was a little bit more important and they wanted to implement that first. So what I was going to show you is our absence process today. It's fairly straightforward, but what it does is it illustrates how a very manual process can quickly be turned into a very useful electronic system where things can get turned around quite quickly, and there's a lot more auditability for the department heads and a lot more real-time information. Before I go on to that, I'll just show you quickly some of our processes that we've put in place at the moment. As you can see, we've got leave requests there. We deal with all sorts of leave requests in there, and we've got some administration tasks which allow us to keep information about our employees. Now, in the administration, that's where we actually integrate with Sun systems, in that all of our cost centres and department information is held within Sun, and XMPro actually pulls that information from Sun systems. We have expenses, and again there's the integration with Sun there as well, in that all of our expenses are posted through into the Sun ledgers. We've got our own version of the credit card reconciliation process, and then we've got some miscellaneous processes, annual reason of policies, season ticket loans, which are just general standalone processes that we've found quite difficult to manage on a manual basis, and which by putting them into XMPro have actually saved us quite a lot of time over the last couple of years. The leave process before we went into XMPro was paper-based, as it is probably for most people in the room. Employees were filling in forms, manually calculating how many days holiday they had left, passing it on through the internal post to their managers, getting the approval, sending it back, which could take some time. Reports on actual absence were manually created in Excel by the secretaries. So for the department heads, they didn't really have any real-time information as to what their staff were doing, because things might not have been updated, things might have been missed. So there was a lot of manual processes there. We also had a couple of audit issues where we have a rule within the bank where everybody has to take 10 consecutive days every year. There was no way for the department heads to actually manage that, or for HR to audit that to make sure that everybody was doing it and it was being enforced. So XMPro, we felt, would be an ideal solution to actually improve the speed at which people could get their absence approved, improve the information that department heads had, but also at the time put an audit in place to make sure our rules and regulations and our policies were being followed. It's not very good. Unfortunately, we weren't able to deal with any the firewall restrictions that we had between here and the bank. So unfortunately, I can't show you XMPro in sort of real time. And it's not coming up very well on the screen, but hopefully you can actually see that. This is XMPro for us. This is a list of all of our processes that we actually have there, and the processes that people can see is managed within the administration function and is restricted by the construction of the process and who can actually start a process off. So for most staff, they would have leave requests and expenses. For myself, as a key administrator of the system, I've got a lot of administration processes and a couple of sort of policies and audits information there as well. You can give people as much access or as little access as you want. It really is very flexible. It's just based on how you set up the process and the groups that you design within the process behind it. And it's very easily manageable as well in terms of changing restrictions. This is our annual leave process. We try to keep the forms as simple as possible. What we've found where we've been implementing things, people don't like change. And if you can try and keep a form as simple as possible, if you can keep it as similar as it is on paper, then we find that people are a lot more receptive to it. What this does do is, as you can see, it pulls the cost centre information back. That information comes back from Sun. It also has the people that are allowed to approve the holiday. That pulls from an approval matrix that we have within XMPro and is based on however you want to structure it. We have it on our team heads, and we also have exception approvers, so we've got the ability to not have any bottlenecks or and not hold up any processes while people are away on holiday. Going back to the simplicity, what we've found is often with dates, people have different ways of putting in dates. So we've structured the form so that it is restricted as to how people can select things. So we have a calendar selection which will ensure that the correct format is filled in. Also, I don't know if you can see them, you've got little asterisks down the side of some of those fields. They're mandatory fields. Not every field has to be mandatory. You decide that as and when you're creating your process. So once all the information is filled in and the dates that you want to take are selected, you'll see at the bottom there we've got the number of days that somebody's entitled to, how many days they've taken already, and how many days they've requested, etc. The entitlement, again, is fed in at the beginning of the year through another process which automatically updates this. And at the bottom there, you've got a list of all your holidays that you've already booked. So again, it's very similar to the paper form where you would have had the information in front of you. It's just putting it onto an electronic version. Once somebody submits their holiday request, it will go off to the approver. Now, within XMPro, we've got a distinction between tasks that are for a particular approver, in this case, Peter Kilcast. He has particular tasks that he has to deal with. Something I'm not going to show you today, but is worth knowing, is the next tab to that is group tasks, which allows us to send processes to groups of people. So, for example, expenses may go to a group of accounts payable people, and any one of them can pick it up and actually deal with the process. So it doesn't have to go to an individual person. As soon as someone's assigned that process to themselves, they then take ownership and they deal with it. So if you've got departments where anyone can deal with something, you don't have to specify an individual person, which is quite useful, especially in expenses. To access something for the approval, Peter would have got an email at the same time. Again, you can make a distinction whether you want to turn emails on or off. We find for the approvers it's actually quite useful to have the emails. Just reminds them that they've got something to do because they're not necessarily used to going into XMPro every day. And again, the approval is very simple, yes or no. They can add comments if they want to, but what's a nice link on the approval, and which is something that we actually sort of resolved with the problem of not having any real-time information of what your employees were doing or what resources you had in the department on a particular day, is you'll see that there is a link to a view which gives you a link to an absence report. By clicking on that link, the absence report opens in a separate window, and this shows you at any time who is away on a particular day or for a particular time. Now, this report doesn't just pick up holiday, it would pick up medical appointments, special leave, unpaid leave, any kind of absence that your people in your department have put in to XMPro, and it allows people to actually plan their resources. Which we found was very useful for the approvers. It gives them much more information to make informed judgments about whether or not somebody can actually go on holiday or not. That's whizzing through the absence. Another example of XMPro in progress is just the way in which we can actually change a paper form very simply into an electronic form. The one you see on the screen at the moment is our season ticket loan form, which may not be something for everybody, but it can apply to any form. We picked up that particular paper, put it into XMPro, and we've implemented the approval rules and the workflow process that used to be done manually, we've implemented that onto the system. As a result of this, a season ticket loan request from somebody which might have taken 2 to 3 days, by the time it's been sent to HR, it's been approved, it's been sent back to finance, can actually be turned around in about an hour if it needs to, which really speeds up the process, particularly when employees forget to renew their season ticket loan and suddenly need something very urgently. Again, the form is very simple, it's very intuitive, and that's one of the nice things about XMPro. You can actually create it to do exactly what your organisation needs. You don't have to follow predefined rules that the software company have set down for you. This is just the second side of the season ticket loan, which would go to HR. This allows us to auto-calculate the monthly payments. This was another problem that we actually had with season ticket loans, is that HR wouldn't necessarily calculate correctly how the payment should be spread out over a year, 10 months, etc. By putting an auto-calculate in there, we were able to get XMPro to tell them how it should actually be spread, rather than them having to manually work it out. It was a minor thing, but it did actually cause us some problems with payroll and reconciling the season ticket loans back. So that's just another example of the little things that you can put into XMPro to just solve some of your operational dilemmas. I've sort of whizzed through that. The only other thing I would say about XMPro is it grows. As I say, we put it in place for absence, we put it in place for expenses, but over time it's actually developed into approximately 13 processes that we've got at the moment, and another 6 or 7 processes that we would like to implement, given the time and the finance to actually do it. As soon as people see what the potential of it is and what it can do, they straight away they see it as the solution to any operational problem that might exist within the organisation. So that's just a word of warning on it. It's a fantastic tool, but it will grow and grow and grow, and it just takes over most things, most processes that you want to do. Has anyone got any questions?
On your leave days there, start leave day, what do you do, a quarter of a day or half a day leave?
You can do half a day. I don't know if it... Flick it back. Yeah, if you see there you've got time of day, I've got it as day at the moment, but we've got morning and afternoon, so you can specify that.
When you're putting new processes in, is that something you do in-house, or do you have to get someone to build it with you?
Because we've built a few processes now in conjunction with PA, we've got quite a good understanding of how XMPro works on the face of it. So what we tend to do is look at our processes, document what we want to do, how we want to do it, and then we come to the PA guys and they tell us whether or not it's possible. Most things are possible, it's just how we get there. But we do it very much in conjunction with PA.
Yeah. So just to answer that question from the back as well, we do have other clients who have actually written their own processes, but I think it really just depends on the technical expertise that you have.
Complexity. Yeah, I mean,
and also the time, isn't that right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, technically, it's the back end of it. I'm not a techie at all, but I can understand certain bits of it. Whereas some other things I think I probably wouldn't be able to get to grips with. PA have tried to teach me certain things, so I can do little things.
Do you want to go for it?
Sorry.
No, there is a bit of a learning curve that you have to get used to. The whole process thinking. I find that if you have someone who's built processes as a career and as a job, they tend to know about all these little potholes that you get, so they can advise you quite well. So generally what I say to clients is, it's not supposed to be rocket science. You know how the process works, you know what your organisation needs, you've got all the forms, everything. But as a good exercise is get that down on paper, save yourself the effort of having us asking you those questions when you've got everything there, and then spend some time with someone just an hour or two with someone like me or some of the other consultants who can talk you through what other clients have done, how best to approach that. And that could save you in the long run in terms of effort, and then make a decision about sort of, am I pulling it in-house or am I, going to outsource it to PA. So it is a very much sort of a case-by-case basis. It's a strange world to think about, because in XMPro world, we deal with cases, we deal with every individual business and organisation and process is a special case. There's some general ideas that you can pull through, but we don't enforce any rules on the business. We are there to, play by their rules. So that's a bit of a different way of looking at it, and companies tend to find that a bit daunting initially. So having a consultant who can guide you through the process always helps.
I think the other thing there is that XMPro offers an exceptionally good framework for building these processes. So the underlying engine that's available to deal with the workflow, the escalations, the social discussions and ad hoc processes, etc., that are always there within a process, exists as part of the core functionality. So really what you're doing is building the process to meet your need, but within the framework that then supports that and makes it easy to administer, easy to build on, and easy to upgrade and move forward. So unlike an in-house development, you are certainly working within a framework that can grow with you quickly and easily, but without that level of complexity you would with a pure development. I think that's quite cool.
I think that's true, Andrew. I mean, we've learnt a lot from the processes that we've built, and we've actually gone back and changed some of the processes as a result of the business changing and some of the new requirements that we've had to put in. And it's actually been relatively straightforward to do that, sort of maybe a day's work to be able to do that, or not even a day. So it definitely adapts with the business quite easily.
Yeah, Katie, you were mentioning earlier to me over coffee that the new social and ad hoc functionality is something that you could be interested in. Do you see that social activity and combining people's sort of more general comments and feelings into the process rather than having set flows is something that would benefit the business going forward?
I think it's a great tool to have. Unfortunately, I think for the bank, I don't think that they are particularly
they like their structure.
Particularly into their social networking. One of the things we have found, though, is the discussion. I don't know if you can see up there, you've got a discuss tab. Our chief executive suddenly found that one day and decided to start sending discussions all around the bank, telling people how he'd approved things. He didn't really know what he was doing with it. But the discussion tab is a great way of communicating within the process rather than outside using a separate email. By clicking on that, if you've got a question about a request, if you've got a question about an expense, you can actually raise that question with the person who started the expense or anybody else within the organisation without having to go outside into your email. And that discussion is then stored within the process, so then you can go back to it and it's auditable, and you've got a record of maybe something that's been approved that's slightly outside of the normal rules and regulations. That's a really nice function once you teach people how to use it.
Oak discussions.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions?
Do you have to have like administrators? Do you have to have different administrators per process? So like HR, so obviously the season ticket loan would be handled by HR. Do you have an administrator in there, or would the general administrator do everything? Once
the process is written, you don't really have an administrator for it. What you do have is you have a rule that says who can start a process, and then you have a rule that says who can approve certain processes. Oh, okay. What we do have is we have ownerships of processes. So if we wanted to change the season ticket loan process at all, that would be done in conjunction with a discussion with HR.
Oh, right, okay.
Some of the administration processes are only handled by certain departments, which then link into the other processes. So, for example, entitlement for holiday, that is only managed by HR.
Okay, yeah, so because like you say, some of our HR department are very fussy over who can see what and who can't see what. So.
Yeah, and you can pin that down completely. Within here, we've got sickness, and you've got a form within here that people fill in once they put their end date for their sickness and they've come back. It automatically generates, and that form goes to HR. But within the audit trail, nobody else would be able to see that. That form is actually encrypted, okay. So the only people that can see it are HR.
Yeah, fine.
So you've got that security.
Yeah, so in XMPro we have this concept of groups. and we work quite a lot with groups. So depending on what sort of group membership you've got, it will slice and dice your visibility around what you can do. You can obviously build the processes to fit workflow patterns that we call, but basically how a process would work, because you might have processes that go to groups, people, so that is different. But generally, from an audit, an administration point of view, we very much use processes to control groups to control who can see what. Okay. Yeah.
Just a quick question. I did notice one of the reports up there looked like it was SQL reporting services. Is that like the standard way to get information out using XMPro, or is there a separate reporting engine? Or
you're talking about that report?
Yep.
Technically,
should I go for the
sorry.
Should I do the techie one?
We've got different types of reports though.
Yeah. So the thing about XMPro is I hate this because there's always a but answer. It's not a you have to do this answer. XMPro has got its own, especially version 6 has got its own reporting platform that has now been shipped with it. So you can now report out of XMPro using the XMPro platform. But we do not prescribe. We do not say this is how it is. Some of our clients use SQL reporting services. Some of them use Crystal reports. So depending on, because it runs on the .NET framework and runs off the .NET technologies, basically we've got people just to build style sheets and just show HTML pages as reports. So it is all dependent on what technology stack you've got in the business already. And that's why one of the things we try and as a consultant I try and push is to say, well, you've got capabilities around SQL reporting services. Why would you want to train someone up to use the XMPro reporting platform if you can use reporting services? So it is all about leveraging your in-house resources as well and leveraging your capabilities already in the business. If you don't have reporting platforms that you prefer and use, we'll give you the XMPro reporting platform.
Okay, cool. Okay. Thanks.
Just to add to that, one of the areas that we are moving into, and is actually a general move for business process management, is the ability to provide details at the point of usage. So we like to call it in-flight analytics, but you could call it whatever you like. So reports that actually give you information at points during the process in order to best inform you of the situation around you and things that could influence your actions within that process. So little KPI graphs, little bits of interest or information that helps you to understand what you're going to do next, and also analytics that can give you some idea of what perhaps should you do next. We call this best next action. So what's happened in the past, what people generally have done, and if there's any equations or anything that you can apply to help you understand where you should go with something, risk factors, for example, can all be applied through the XM Analyzer reporting platform as part of the process. So those things that Rainier has just alluded to, the difference between different reporting packages, can all be built into that. But obviously the XM Analyzer does give you core and base functionality to provide that sort of thing as well. So that's a little addition there. Any other questions?
Sorry, this might require a completely different demonstration altogether. Are you able to illustrate how this XMPro could work as an expenses management system? So an end user, I'm sat at home with a whole pile of receipts, the approval process, and then into Sun beyond that.
Would I be able to demonstrate that?
Well,
I can,
paint a
but not
picture of
today.
how it works.
Oh, paint a picture. Okay, just explain.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to say we've probably got a demo that I can show you, but it's really dangerous thing to do in this audience. Learned my lesson through the years. You don't just jump into product without being ready for where you're going to be. Yeah, it's actually quite straightforward, the expense process, and we've actually done quite a couple of them. Obviously, what you always have to remember is that our motto is that each business has got their own things to deal with, their own setup of how they want to run their business. But generally, when we speak about expenses, there's quite a couple of categories. Firstly, so you have an advance payment request, which people want money just to go do something. You have the club membership type thing. And then you have, let's talk about the standard expense claim. So I went out, spent money on my card, and I need to be reimbursed via my via my salary. So what we do is when we piggyback off the Sun functionality, we create supplier accounts for the employees. So they'll be sitting as suppliers in Sun. We then look at, as a general first move, is we look at the journals that we want to generate off of the back of that process. So how would we account for travel expenses? What accounts would we want to use? Those type of things. What we then do is we set up in XMPro, we then set up concepts of we can either use iPOS, so we can use the idea of items in iPOS with their account coding and those things set up already, or we can set up our own sort of idea of account coding and items in XMPro. So you can select travel expense, that's got an account sitting off the back of that, those type of things. We've got business units associated with users and those things. And then what we then, so easily to set up, quite easily we can set up that capture screen, but also taking up all of that sort of information that comes off the back that we can get from Sun, that we can glean from everywhere, to basically make that journal posting as automatic as possible, so that we've got all the little bits and bobs and we just put it into Sun when we're ready to go. What happens then is we need to have a discussion around your approval matrix, how you do that. Can we use iPOS approval matrix for that? Do you want us to build you a custom approval matrix? A lot of people have the one-step line manager approval. Again, each business has their sort of own little nuances of how they want that to work. That goes to accounts payable generally. Accounts payable check the journal that's going to go in XMPro, because basically all that information has now been collected for them. They hit let's go. We use the jet engine that iPOS uses. That goes straight into Sun, and there you go. So it can be as simple as a 3-step process, or it could be as complex as a 5 to 10-step process, depending on how big your approval matrix is and where your approval matrix comes from. So it's something that we've really got good at doing, is this expense processes, and we've cut down the design, develop, and decision time around expenses quite a bit. So it's something we quite good at. I mean, John at the back there can really give you a nice demo of expenses and things if you need to really grab him, and he'll yeah.
I'd just like to highlight it's particularly popular in the oil and gas sector. We've got quite a few clients doing it there, financial services as well, and we internally use it for expenses and employee onboarding and things.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? We exhausted the audience now. Okay. Katie, I really want to thank you, actually. On a personal note, I looked at you demoing it, and sometimes when we talk here, it feels like we're just talking, but as you guys can see, we actually do things. I almost feel vindicated that the reason why I'm here is actually do things. And it's really, you presented it really well. Thank you very much.
No problem.
I appreciate that. I've got a little tear in my eye. Thank you.
Thank you. If anyone does want to grab me during lunch and ask any other questions, I'm more than happy to help. So, okay.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Now. Yes, I owe you a glass of wine. All right. So, and then we jump back to me with all these theoretical things happening as well. But as you guys can see, there's actually sort of practical and physical product that comes with the back of this. This is not just us talking pretty pictures. There are stuff off the back of that. I just need to find a way to help the audience understand what we're trying to do and not bombard them with unnecessary themes and things. But in order to sort of introduce our next segment, I have to do this. But so if we've spoken about sort of the structured to unstructured line that we've got at the top there, and I've hinted to the fact that we're moving towards the left. And finally, we reach the sort of, in my mind, the far left of the XMPro picture. And what this is about is that we've found recently, now obviously we keep working in the business process management space, and we keep seeing it evolve. And what we've recently found is that where your traditional process follows a sort of ladder analogy, where you take step 1, you go up 1 step in your ladder, you take step 2, you go back, you can go back 1 step back down. So you sort of go up and down this ladder of steps that you've got to do. You can have a little slightly more complex ladder, but ultimately it's one big ladder that moves up and down. What we've now found is that as the service industries come online and you have what we call a knowledge economy, really, where you've got very knowledgeable workers who you pay a lot of money to do a specific job. And they're not necessarily going to be happy with this restrictive environment where it says you have to do this, and then you have to do that, and then you have to do that in that sequence as well. So what we found is now we get these dynamic, unstructured processes. And a funny thing is, one good example of that is the supplier onboarding. But the difference is, in an organization where you've got low risk, the supplier onboarding is quite a simple process. You capture the form, they approve it, it goes into sign. When you've got a business that you've got high risk, which is listed on any stock exchanges, any of those sort of scary environments where you have to deal with suppliers that potentially have legal ramifications off the back of that, compliance issues, credit risk issues, those type of things, where contracts become more valuable, and take on of a supplier is actually quite a complex process. You need to get legal involved, you need to get compliance involved, you need to get the guys from credit risk involved, you need to check some CompliNet registers potentially to see if that supplier has something that, and basically in that sense is the employee that you employ to take on that supplier is actually someone who's potentially an expert in how compliance works, and can we check if suppliers are compliant. Now what we do then is we use the analogy of a tree. And basically there's not just one way to climb a tree. You can move around between different branches of the tree, you can move up and down. Ultimately you're going to reach the same goal, but the way you reach that goal is slightly different. So hence the idea now of dynamic processes. And really ultimately what we've done in the product itself, and you'll see in the next section how the product deals with that, so practically how we deal with it. But practically all we have to do, or all we do, is we provide you with functionality to discuss. Like we've seen, you can discuss processes, you can make decisions, and all that gets audited real time as part of that process. So now, if you have a discussion with your compliance officer saying, this guy sounds a bit fishy, they're in an environment that could potentially cause us risk. Can we use this guy? He comes back, says, you know what, I've looked at it, please see this document I've actually downloaded about them, they look a bit dodgy. Let's reject them on the basis of what we've seen here. All that information actually gets audited and put in a system. We've also got we've added the concept of an ad hoc task. So something could come out of this, and you could realize that actually I want to assign a task to my secretary for Monday to, go back and find me an article about X. And you can actually generate an ad hoc task off this process. So now it's more of a dynamic thing. It's more of a spider web of information going out to the central case of trying to take on a supplier. And XMPro has now started providing us functionality to do that. So I know it's a little bit sort of new technology and new ideas. Okay, it's new technology, but it's not new ideas. We used to do this in the past. Businesses work like this. They've always worked like this. It's not something that is new. It's just we've now developed software that can allow us to deal with it within a managed framework. All right, so as you can see, all the concepts that I've put up there, it's now event-based processes. We want operational intelligence, like Andrew said, with in-flight analytics to help us make decisions about where to go. And at the last statement really is just, we don't want to stifle the creativity of those knowledge workers and their ability to do their job. So we actually want to allow them to function within this creative environment where they need to apply their knowledge. So I'm not the best person to explain this, so we unfortunately couldn't have Peter here. And also the correct way of pronouncing his surname, which no one will get, is van Skalkwijk. And I'm sure no one will be able to get that. But it's
just because
funny.
You're South African as well.
My surname is a nightmare as well. Anyway, he's not able to be here today. He's the CEO and founder of XMPro, and he's got some really revolutionary ideas. So brace yourselves, because obviously he's quite a thinker in the world of BPM. So he's going to throw some concepts out there which might not always be as straightforward or as intuitive as you might want them to be. But he'll show you some nice product as well in the videos. So I'm going to jump over there. Can I fire the introduction? Ready to go. There we go. I'm just going to...
Hello, everyone.
Okay. I'm going to reverse him. Sorry, I made Peter do a pose. He's not going to enjoy that.
Hello everyone, I'm Peter from XMPro. I'm very sorry I can't be in two places at the same time. These are always great events to attend, and I'm thrilled to be able to spend a few minutes with you talking about a very innovative solution that will change the way you work. It's called XMPro. Some of you already use a version of the system, and it's called iPOS 3P. But for those of you that aren't, I'd like to start out by pointing a very inconvenient fact. 70% of workflow systems fail. 70%. And I'm sure you've all seen it happen. Computers that are covered in post-it notes, emails and spreadsheets become the go-to tools of choice. And after all this effort, we are no closer to meeting our goals and our KPIs. It's an issue that's rooted in one single problem. Most workflows in business these days are still suited to traditional industrial workplaces, pushing buttons and banging nails. But it's simply not like that anymore. We are in a knowledge economy, and the best outcomes rely on having the best people. And if they're in a one-dimensional, overly structured workflow, then you're not using their ability, the very thing you hire them for. XMPro is what we describe as an intelligent business operations system. It provides your business with a system that works the way real people work. So you're able to be flexible when you're presented with unforeseen, unusual, or difficult circumstances, making your workspace more collaborative, utilizing your employees for their knowledge, and empowering your staff to make smarter decisions based on real-time data. It's the only way to work in the knowledge economy, and I'd love to tell you all about it. Unfortunately, we only have a handful of minutes today, so we've put together a list of the 7 most common questions about XMPro for you. Now I'm going to hand over to you to select 3 or 4 of those questions that you'd like to know the answers to.
We wanted to actually make this interactive, and we didn't want necessarily Peter to just do a long talk. So what we thought is, here are some areas where XMPro can certainly help your business, and also is very effective in terms of a product. So what we'd like to do is just run a quick straw poll. We were thinking of doing a text or a Twitter poll, but it all got a little bit complex, so we left that. So I think a show of hands is probably appropriate. Just looking down this list, we've got social workflows and productivity, which we've already alluded to. We've got why do traditional workflows fail, and that's a ladder-based, straightforward, up and down type workflow. We've got the difference between a knowledge economy that utilizes people's knowledge and gives them that flexibility, and a machine economy whereby you click a button and the machine does it all. We've also got hybrid workflows, which is a bit of both, and interestingly, next best action, or best next action, which is an area that I personally find very useful, and then some de-risking type questions. So just a quick show of hands, if we were to say we would go with number 1 as an answer that Peter can give us. Anyone would be up for that? Nope, okay. So much for social. Traditional workflows failing, number 2. About 6, 7, okay. Number 3, the difference between knowledge and machine economy. All a bit esoteric. That's one or 2 there, okay. So far we've got number 3 as being, number 2. Number 4, hybrid workflows, a bit of both. Ooh, okay. So certainly that's an interesting area, because most people are sitting probably in more traditional workflows, and it's moving it away from that, and it's slowly becoming more important to have unstructured workflow. Therefore, hybrid is certainly an interesting area. So we'll say that's top of the list so far. Best next action, in-flight analytics. Okay, that's pretty good too. So we'll say 4 and 5. XMPro de-risking your business. Okay, so 3rd I would say in the list, and then 7, how can we do more intelligent business? Okay, I'm going to have to sort of make a rough guess on this. What would you say it was, Renier? I think hybrid seemed to be...
the hybrid was a good one,
yep.
Yes.
So let's start with Peter's answer to the hybrid question.
And Renier driving the laptop, yes.
Just go to the next slide, Renier.
Am I going to close the slides now? There we go, okay. There we go. And we said...
Question 4.
Question 4. Okay, I'm not going to stop Peter now mid-hand.
Traditionally, there are 2 distinct styles of running your business processes. You can either have a rigid structure where you can draw the flow in advance, or you can have a completely unstructured environment where you have no control, like email. Completely unstructured, but also very uncontrolled. But how most people operate and how most people feel comfortable working is in a structured environment that allows them some flexibility when the need arises. We call it a hybrid system, and XMPro is the only system available that does that. See, with most operations today, whether it's investigating a new product, bringing on a new staff member, or onboarding a client, you need a system that lets you swap between a rigid process and an unstructured process at different points in the flow. For example, if you're looking to open a savings bank account, it's a very structured process. However, once you onboard a private wealth customer, you need the process to be unstructured, as you need to take into account the specific circumstances of that specific individual. You may want to call in the help of a specialist advisor to get advice on structuring a package that would suit their investment profile, some personal plans, and specific requests that that customer may have. Once you've done this, the process takes on a rigid form again, where you go through the formalities of signing a product contract and doing compliance checks. It then becomes unstructured again as you manage their ongoing relationship and support requests, and so on. You can see why one set of rules doesn't fit all processes. And it's the same for other complex situations. For example, we see this when ISO 9000 requirements impact a company's supplier or contractor onboarding. Structure needs to give way to flexibility at certain times, and it's allowed within a hybrid system. Put simply, with structured workflows, you are taking a guess at what's going to happen in future, and you're trying to predict the path of every new transaction. With hybrid systems, you are able to build the path as you walk it, still within a set of boundaries, but without needing to confirm in advance what route you're going to take. It gives you more autonomy, it utilizes intelligence, and mimics how people work in the real world.
One more, and then.
So that was his answer to structured to hybrid, and obviously the XMPro product is designed to deal with both of these scenarios, and that's really the key fact in where we're going. I think the best next action had a good response, and that does show some good products. So we'll move on to that one. How does in-flight analytics assist you as a business? And we are heading towards lunch, so we'll just do this one and then perhaps move on.
Which one?
Best next action.
I knew you were going to go for that one.
Best next action is something really clever that is built into XMPro. It can make suggestions on what your best next move is at any step of a process using a few different forms of analysis. Firstly, it can use historical analysis to review all the past decisions that have been made from this point. So what decision was made the last 50 times your organization was here? Right through to more complex history like what was the outcome of all of these decisions. Secondly, it can take into account the context of what you were doing there and then. So based on information already completed on a form, for example, it can suggest what to do next. Thirdly, it can look at all external influences and analyze data that you wouldn't have necessarily been aware of. For example, shipping or stock exchange issues of a particular supplier or the weather patterns at the moment. From there, it will guide you through the decision-making process and allow you to take the best next action. So you're not making the same mistakes twice. You're learning from all your workforce, current and past. And you're gaining knowledge from external sources you may not otherwise be aware of. Imagine, as a new employee, the system helping you safely do the right next thing. It sounds like science fiction, so let's look at a few examples.
In this procurement example for best next action, we will look at a transaction where we are doing a OFAC check for supplier onboarding. Now, with the OFAC check, it will check for foreign individuals, and in this instance we have a category called vessel, and the information that was returned from the OFAC database actually found matches for entity and individual. Now, there are three options. This is now directed to the financial manager for review and checking. The process can't continue from here. The compliance guardrails have kicked in, and in this instance we will look at one of the three options. So what Ted Orange will do in this instance is go through the best next action logic. Now, this is a set of rules that are provided by the OFAC regulator, and in that one, if I say no, I'm not going to go through the detail, but if I say no on this one, and I say no on that one, and I say yes here, it'll actually advise that the best next action is a concession request. If I change that to no, and I change it to yes over here, so it's a series of questions that you go through. In that instance, it will require you to, or the best next action that it will advise you on is to report this to the OFAC hotline. As you can see, it does not take over the actions, it merely advises what should be done. Or if I choose no over there, it will approve it for onboarding and the process can continue. This is a different example of a best next action or decision support, and in this instance this is a medical or life sciences solution, and here we have 4 options: refer to a specialist, reject enrollment, and this is for cord blood banking. In this instance, we will actually look at the information, the context of the information that was completed here, and also look at the previous history of similar transactions. Best next action here will actually give us a risk rating based on the information that was completed on the form, and looking then at similar circumstances. Over the last 1,000 transactions, only 9.73% of these were approved, and based on this information as we have it here, the best next action is actually to reject the enrollment, but it is still up to the individual to actually decide which of these ones to choose. So there might be contextual information that will lead them to actually refer this to a specialist, but under normal circumstances, if there are no additional information, you would most likely reject it.
That's a nice example of the analytical capabilities as well. You can build all sorts of things in there. So unfortunately, we hope to do more of these, but we have overrun slightly, but obviously iPOS 5.8 this morning, very important. So I think we'll have to draw it to a close there for lunch, but I do hope that at least the XMPro message in terms of what you can do, the potentials, thoughts for how you can improve process and improve your business beyond the frameworks of the core systems such as iPOS, etc., and indeed within those boundaries, those blurred boundaries that René was talking about earlier, where you have interactions between these systems and extend on the process. So, so thank you very much for your interest in the session. Lunch will now be served in the Queen Room next door, and then we'll be rejoining in about an hour for the 5.7 improvement session. So thank you very much, and thank you, René.